What's up guys, my name is Ace, and about a week and a half ago on March 14th, we were meant to be seeing some notable buffs to the belt fed attachment for the LMGs in this game. However, when that update came, I did the testing on it and found that nothing actually changed with this at all, aside from one of the 3 points, and this is the aim down sight firing movement speed penalty is removed when using the belt feed attachment on these LMGs, so you will be able to strafe and fire at the same speed as if you were just strafing and not firing. Now today, it turns out they finally got on top of this, and this patch is now live, so that's what we're going to be covering today. I wanted to share the updated values for how many rounds you can fire before the gun overheats for each of the LMGs with and without rapid fire, and then I also wanted to share the new overheat timings because it turns out some of them were buffed and others were nerfed, and that's not what the patch notes stated. In either case, diving right in, let's have a look at how many rounds you can fire without letting go of the trigger before the gun will overheat, keeping in mind this value will change if you use the rapid fire attachment. And as we can see here, we are seeing some very notable improvements. With the PU21, pre-patch it was 44 rounds before overheating, now it's 65. For the XMG, it was 47 pre-patch, it's 59 post-patch. For the GPMG, it went from 50 rounds up to 75 rounds, and then for the Fang 82, it went from 39 rounds up to 50 rounds. So these are absolutely very notable buffs to the belt-fed attachment on these guns. And one value I looked at in the past with my initial belt-fed mod breakdown that I wanted to bring up here again is the number of kills you can potentially get while holding down the trigger non-stop if you hit every bullet. And this is just meant to show the extreme thresholds that are possible with these guns using belt-fed. And it's really just meant to highlight that if you're using this mod on these LMGs against regular players in-game, you really don't need to worry about overheating, even pre-patch, but post-patch is even better. And with the PU21, it went from 11 kills up to 16 kills. With the XMG, it went from 12 kills up to 15 kills. For the GPMG, it went from 10 to 15. And then finally, for the Fang, it went from 13 up to 17 kills. So that's pretty crazy. That's showing the extremes as well. If you're just constantly holding down the trigger, obviously you're going to be taking breaks between kills. And as a result, especially post-patch, I think you would be extremely hard-pressed to overheat your gun if you're just using it normally against regular players and not doing something like crazy pre-firing down a hallway or trying to take out a streak, for instance. In either case, that was just the first adjustment that was done to the belt-fed mod, and that is quite a big one. Next, the second buff they mentioned that didn't go live until today is the overheat now dissipates more quickly. And in testing this, I actually discovered something that I missed with my initial breakdown, and that is all of these guns have different overheat cooldown times as well. I just made the assumption that they were all the same when it came to the overheat cooldown, and that's not the case. So you're going to get some updated information here as well. And just keep this simple, the time that I'm measuring here for these LMGs starts the moment the gun overheats, and it ends the moment you're able to fire your gun again. Keeping in mind, you are able to fire your gun before that overheat meter gets all the way back down to 0. So it's not technically the entire cooldown time to get all the way back to 0. It's just the amount of time before you can fire your gun again once you start overheating. And first, starting it off with the PU21, I also want to point out here just how much longer you have to fire before overheating on the right side compared to the left side. But then after that, when we look at the overheat cooldown, pre-patch, it took 4.13 seconds. Post-patch, it now takes 4.9 seconds. So this is the opposite of what the patch note states. The patch note says that the overheat now dissipates more quickly. Not with the PU21. It actually takes a little bit longer before you can fire your gun again once you start overheating. Then we have the XMG, and this one did actually see a notable buff. Pre-patch, your overheat cooldown was 6.7 seconds. Now it's just 5 seconds. So that's a very noticeable improvement there. It's a similar story with the GPMG7. Pre-patch, it was 6.53 seconds. Post-patch is now 4.75 seconds. And then finally, with the Fang 82, just like with the PU21, this one actually saw a bit of a nerf rather than a buff to its overheat cooldown. Pre-patch, it was 4.42 seconds, and post-patch, it's now 4.78 seconds. So it's not like the PU21 and the Fang 82 are significantly worse than they were pre-patch, but they are worse by a small margin, which is unexpected since they were meant to be getting better. Now, at the end of the day, even with those nerfs applied to the PU21 and the Fang 82, all of the LMGs are now at least quite comparable when it comes to this overheat cooldown time. They're all hovering between 4.75 and 5 seconds. And with that, that's pretty much it for the changes that came with the belt-fed mod attachment. And when it comes to my thoughts on this, I've been very clear about this from the beginning. At least for multiplayer, I always thought the belt-fed mod was in a good place. I really had no problem with it. I felt the trade-offs were appropriate, especially since it didn't harm our handling stats. The way I saw it is it's not the type of attachment you pull out if you want to shoot down streaks or anything. That's what the extended mag attachments are for, and I do think there should be a place for all of those attachments. However, I did find it to be a very nice attachment if you were just using the LMG to kill enemy players, and play sort of normally with the LMGs. And I really never had a problem with the guns overheating when playing in this way pre-patch. So like I said, for multiplayer at least, I really don't think the belt-fed mod needed a buff. But I can absolutely understand the zombies players asking for buffs to this. Of course, in the zombies game mode is a totally different style of mode, and there is going to be a whole lot more spraying necessary before stopping. It's not like you're just shooting one zombie at a time, you're usually mowing down hordes of zombies. So I get it, in the case of zombies, the belt-fed mod was probably quite disappointing. And therefore, overall, this buff was probably quite appropriate to also apply to zombies mode. Personally, I think they could have just handled it separately and perhaps just gave buffs like this if you pack-a-punched while using the belt-fed mod or something along those lines. But to be fair, that's just me being nitpicky. If we're looking for like absolute perfect balance in my eyes, that would have been the better route. At the end of the day, I love the belt-fed mod before this update. It's now an even better attachment on the LMGs, and I'm not really going to complain about that fact. I'm going to be using the belt-fed mod 99% of the times when using LMGs now. The only exception would still be if I'm trying to use a class setup to take out streaks. I would still rather go with an extended mag attachment for that specific purpose. Now, of course, those are just my thoughts on that. Another thing I wanted to talk about here a little bit is just how long it took them to get this small update out. This was such a small update that was meant to take place almost 2 weeks ago at this point. It was about a week and a half ago. And this was basically the entire update. And that update just didn't happen. And it took them about a week and a half to actually get that in place. So I don't really know what's going on there. Things seem to be happening very, very slowly when it comes to receiving updates and also communication. I realize Season 3 is right around the corner, and I hope this is the reason that we saw such a delay on this, is that they're just working really hard to get a massive update for Season 3 out. But perhaps that's just wishful thinking. I guess we'll be finding out information about Season 3 soon. I'm hoping tomorrow, actually, but who knows? It could be any time this week. I do suspect we will be seeing the blog post and roadmap at some point before the end of the week. I know another potential theory here for why we're not seeing updates at a reasonable rate from Treyarch is they may actually be working on the next Call of Duty that's coming out this fall, rumored to be Black Ops 7. Apparently, Treyarch is in charge of that, so maybe they have shifted a lot of the resources to that game, and therefore they've just left kind of a skeleton crew behind and they're barely supporting this game, which would be extremely frustrating for them to essentially like abandon this game and just leave it behind with a skeleton crew so they can work on their next game, but that may be the case. In either case, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. First off, how are you guys feeling about these buffs to the belt-fed mod now that they have actually taken place? Are you guys generally happy with these buffs or not so much? And I am curious to hear from both the multiplayer side as well as the zombie side of things. And then the second thing I'm curious about is just your thoughts on how long it took them to get this taken care of. Do you guys agree with the theory that they're probably just working on the next game, or do you think it's something else? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.